5 million francs. That's what the Gestapo offered for her capture, making her the most wanted person in France, the highest bounty placed on any Allied agent during World War II. And the woman they were hunting, Nancy Wake, Australian socialite turned resistance fighter, was leading 7,000 French resistance fighters in guerrilla warfare against Nazi occupation, killing German soldiers with her bare hands when necessary, bicycling 500 kilometers through German checkpoints to deliver critical radio codes, organizing sabotage operations that destroyed German supply lines, and doing all of this while the Gestapo hunted her obsessively, gave her the code name the White Mouse because she kept slipping through their traps, and spent years trying to capture or kill the woman who was making the German occupation of France exponentially more difficult. She wasn't supposed to be a warrior. She was supposed to be a wealthy socialite hosting parties in Marseille, married to French industrialist Henri Fiocca, living a comfortable life drinking champagne and wearing expensive clothes. But when Nazi Germany invaded France in 1940, Nancy made a decision that changed her life completely. She decided to fight, decided that comfortable life under Nazi occupation was worse than dangerous life in resistance. And for the next 5 years, she became one of most effective Allied agents in France, trained by British Special Operations Executive, parachuted behind enemy lines multiple times, and survived when thousands of other agents were captured and executed. After the war, she lived until 2011, died at age 98 in London, having outlived most of the Nazis who hunted her, having seen the Third Reich destroyed, having received medals from France, Britain, United States, and Australia, and having proven that gender is irrelevant to courage, that women can be as deadly and effective in combat as men, that the most dangerous warrior on the battlefield isn't always the one with the biggest weapon, but sometimes the one with the most determination and intelligence. This is Nancy Wake, the White Mouse, the woman with 5 million franc bounty who the Gestapo never caught. The socialite who became spy, who became resistance leader, who killed Nazis and lived to 98. Subscribe for impossible courage. Let's begin.
Nancy Grace Augusta Wake, born August 30th, 1912 in Wellington, New Zealand, wasn't born in France, wasn't born into a resistance movement, wasn't born with any particular destiny for warfare. She was youngest of 6 children. Her father was journalist. Her mother was a strong-willed woman who raised the children. And when Nancy was young, the family moved to Australia, settled in Sydney, and Nancy grew up in a relatively normal Australian middle-class environment, going to school, learning proper behavior expected of young women in 1920s Australia. But Nancy was never comfortable with conventional expectations. She was rebellious, strong-willed like her mother, but more adventurous. And when she was 16 years old, she ran away from home, worked as nurse, saved money, and at age 20, in 1932, she left Australia completely, moved to Europe, worked as journalist in Paris and London. And this was the beginning of Nancy's transformation from Australian girl to international woman, experiencing European culture, learning French, becoming sophisticated. 1933, Nancy is working as journalist in Vienna and Berlin, and she witnesses something that changes her forever. She sees the rise of Nazi power in Germany, sees the violence against Jews, sees Nazi thugs beating people in the streets, sees the beginning of what will become the Holocaust, and Nancy is horrified, disgusted, and this creates in her a visceral hatred of Nazism that will define her life. She sees evil emerging and she recognizes it. And years later, when she has opportunity to fight Nazis, she does so with personal conviction born from witnessing their brutality. Mid-1930s, Nancy moves to Marseille in southern France, and her life becomes comfortable, wealthy, sophisticated. She meets and marries Henri Fiocca, French industrialist, wealthy man who owns factories and businesses, and Nancy becomes wealthy French socialite, hosting parties, wearing expensive clothes, drinking champagne, living the good life. And this is where her story could have ended, comfortable wife of wealthy husband living in Marseille. But then, September 1939, Germany invades Poland and World War II begins. And May 1940, Germany invades France.
The fall of France is catastrophic. French military collapses in 6 weeks. British forces evacuated Dunkirk. Germans occupy northern France, including Paris. And southern France becomes Vichy France, technically unoccupied, but governed by collaborationist French government working with Nazis. And Marseille, where Nancy lives, is in Vichy zone. And Nancy watches as her comfortable life is destroyed by Nazi occupation. And she makes a decision. She's not going to accept this. She's going to fight. Initially, Nancy's resistance work is humanitarian. She uses her husband's money and connections to help Allied soldiers escape France. British and French soldiers left behind after Dunkirk, wounded soldiers, escaped prisoners of war. She creates escape network, moving soldiers from Marseille to Spain, providing them with false documents, money, safe houses. And this is dangerous work. Vichy police and Gestapo are hunting resistance networks. Punishment for helping enemy soldiers is death. But Nancy doesn't care. She remembers the Nazi violence she witnessed in Germany in 1933, and she's determined to fight back. Her husband Henri supports her work, provides money, provides cover. His business connections give Nancy credibility, allow her to move around without suspicion. And for months, Nancy successfully operates Escape Network, helps dozens of Allied soldiers escape. And she's good at this. She's charming, sophisticated, can talk her way through checkpoints, can convince officials that she's just wealthy socialite visiting friends. And her cover works until 1943. By 1943, Nancy has been operating her escape network for 3 years, has helped hundreds of Allied soldiers escape. And the Gestapo knows there's a major escape network operating in Marseille. They've been investigating, arresting people, interrogating them, and they're getting closer to Nancy. They know there's a woman involved. They have descriptions. They have reports of sophisticated, wealthy woman who seems to be everywhere soldiers are escaping. And they give her code name, the White Mouse, because every time they try to trap her, she slips away. The Gestapo places a 5 million franc bounty on the White Mouse, the highest bounty placed on any Allied agent, making Nancy the most wanted person in France. And they circulate her description, they raid safe houses, they arrest members of her network, and Nancy realizes she's burned. Her cover is blown. She needs to escape. But her husband Henri tells her to go, tells her he'll stay behind to maintain businesses and protect family, tells her to escape while she can. And Nancy reluctantly agrees. This is the last time she sees Henri alive. Nancy escapes France through the Pyrenees Mountains into Spain, dangerous journey through mountains, avoiding German patrols, nearly dying from exposure. But she makes it to Spain, then to Gibraltar, then to England. And she arrives in London in 1943, age 31, having lost everything. Her husband, her home, her comfortable life, but she's alive, and she's ready to continue fighting. In London, Nancy volunteers for SOE, Special Operations Executive, the British intelligence organization that trains agents for operations behind enemy lines. And SOE is interested in Nancy because she has experience in France, speaks fluent French, knows the terrain, knows how resistance networks operate, and they accept her for training. And Nancy enters SOE training program, which is designed to be extremely difficult, to weed out anyone who can't handle the physical and mental stress of operating behind enemy lines. SOE training includes physical conditioning, weapons training, explosives, hand-to-hand combat, parachute training, survival skills, interrogation resistance, and Nancy excels at all of it. She's 31 years old, which is older than most SOE agents. Most are in their early 20s, but Nancy is tougher than the young men. She's motivated by hatred of Nazis and by desire to avenge whatever happened to her husband, Henri, and she becomes one of the most capable agents in her training class. One particular skill Nancy learns is silent killing. How to kill enemy sentry without making noise, using knife for bare hands, and Nancy trains in this extensively, because she knows that in occupied France, she might need to kill quietly. And this training will save her life later. This training in killing with bare hands becomes a crucial moment in her legend. April 1944, Nancy completes SOE training and is assigned to Operation in Central France, Auvergne region, where she'll work with French resistance organizing guerrilla warfare in preparation for D-Day invasion. And her mission is to parachute into occupied France, make contact with local resistance groups, organize them, train them, supply them with weapons, and coordinate their actions with Allied invasion plans. And this is an extremely dangerous mission. Hundreds of SOE agents have been captured and executed. Life expectancy for agents in occupied France is measured in weeks or months. But Nancy volunteers because she wants to return to France, wants to continue fighting. Late April 1944, Nancy parachutes into Auvergne, central France, mountainous region with strong resistance presence, and her parachute landing is rough. She lands in trees, gets tangled, but she makes it down safely and makes contact with local resistance leader. And immediately she begins organizing the resistance groups in the region. And this is where Nancy's real work begins. The French resistance in Auvergne in 1944 is a mix of different groups, communists, socialists, de Gaullists, all with different political views, but all willing to fight Germans. And Nancy's job is to unify them, coordinate them, train them, supply them, and she does this brilliantly. She's 31 years old. She's a woman in a male-dominated resistance movement. She's an Australian with British accent speaking French. She's an outsider in every way, but she earns respect through competence and courage.
Nancy organizes supply drops. British planes drop weapons, explosives, ammunition, and Nancy coordinates the drops, sets up landing zones, distributes weapons to resistance groups, and she trains fighters in guerrilla tactics, sabotage, ambush techniques, and under her coordination, the resistance in Auvergne becomes much more effective. They begin attacking German supply lines, sabotaging railways, ambushing German patrols during their patrols, and the Germans respond with increased security and reprisals. One of Nancy's most famous actions during this period involves bicycle. There's critical need to make radio contact with London, but the radio codes have been lost or compromised, and Nancy volunteers to bicycle to another resistance group over 200 kilometers away to get new codes. And this means bicycling through German-occupied territory, through checkpoints, through areas where Germans are hunting resistance fighters, and Nancy does it. She bicycles over 200 kilometers. Later, she says it was closer to 500 kilometers, with all the detours and backtracking to avoid Germans, and she delivers the codes, makes the radio contact, and returns. And her legs are so sore afterward she can barely walk, but the mission is successful. Another famous incident, possibly the most famous, happens when Nancy is on patrol with resistance fighters and they encounter German sentry guarding installation, and they need to get past the sentry silently without alerting other Germans, and Nancy volunteers to kill the sentry. She approaches him from behind, and using the hand-to-hand combat training from SOE, she kills him with her bare hands, using a karate chop technique to the neck that crushes his windpipe, killing him silently. And this story becomes legendary, the white mouse killing German soldier with her bare hands, and Nancy later dismisses it as simply doing what was necessary, not heroic, just practical. But the story spreads through the resistance movement and later becomes a defining moment of her legend. By June 1944, when D-Day invasion happens, Nancy has organized approximately 7,000 resistance fighters in Auvergne region. This is enormous force, 7,000 armed fighters conducting coordinated guerrilla warfare. And when the invasion happens, Nancy's resistance groups attack German positions throughout central France, destroying bridges, sabotaging railways, ambushing German units trying to reach Normandy. And the German military reports from this period show the effectiveness. German units are delayed, supplies are disrupted, and Nancy's resistance contributes significantly to Allied success.
But the Germans respond with brutal reprisals. They burn villages suspected of supporting resistance. They execute civilians. They hunt resistance fighters. And Nancy's groups take casualties. People she knows are killed. Villages are destroyed. And Nancy witnesses the cost of resistance, the price that French civilians pay for fighting Germans. But the resistance continues,
because the alternative, living under Nazi occupation, is worse. Summer 1944, Allied forces break out from Normandy, advance across France, and Nancy's resistance groups continue operations, harassing retreating German forces, and by August, Paris is liberated. By September, most of France is liberated, and Nancy's mission is complete. The Germans are expelled from France, the resistance has achieved its objective, and Nancy returns to Paris. In Paris, Nancy learns what happened to her husband, Henri. The Gestapo arrested him in 1943 after Nancy escaped. They interrogated him about her wife's activities, and Henri refused to talk, refused to give information about Nancy's escape network. And the Gestapo tortured him, and eventually they executed him. And Nancy learns all this after the war ends, learns that her husband died protecting her, died because of her resistance activities, and this devastates her. She feels guilt, even though Henri chose to stay behind, chose to protect her, made his own decision to resist the Gestapo. After the war, Nancy receives decorations from multiple countries. France awards her the Croix de Guerre, the Médaille de la Résistance. Britain awards her the George Medal. The United States awards her the Medal of Freedom with Bronze Palm. Australia eventually awards her medals. She becomes Most Decorated Servicewoman of World War II. But Nancy doesn't feel like hero. She feels like survivor, like someone who did what was necessary. And she struggles with civilian life after the war. Post-war Nancy tries to return to normal life, but it's impossible. How do you return to hosting parties and drinking champagne after years of killing Nazis and organizing guerrilla warfare? After losing your husband, after watching villages burn, after seeing so much death? And Nancy struggles. She drinks heavily. She moves between countries. She has relationships, but they don't last. She's restless, traumatized by war, even though she doesn't talk about it. And this pattern continues for decades. Nancy tries various careers. She runs for Australian Parliament in 1949 and 1951, but loses both times, partly because of sexism. Voters in 1950s Australia aren't ready to elect a woman, especially a woman with Nancy's history. She tries business ventures, she works various jobs, but nothing satisfies her. She's been at peak of intensity during war, and everything after feels flat, meaningless. She moves back to Britain in the 1970s, settles in London, and finally finds some peace in her later years. She gives occasional interviews about her war service, attends veteran reunions, receives recognition from various organizations, and she watches as her story becomes more widely known. Books are written about her, documentaries are made, and younger generations learn about the White Mouse, the woman with 5 million franc bounty who the Gestapo never caught. 1980s and 90s, Nancy becomes more willing to talk about her experiences. She's in her 70s and 80s now. Most of the Nazis who hunted her are dead. Most of her fellow resistance fighters are dead. And she's one of the last survivors, one of the few who can tell the story firsthand. And she does interviews, she attends ceremonies, she becomes a living link to the French resistance and SOE operations. 2001, Nancy Wake's autobiography, The White Mouse, is published, telling her story in her own words, and it becomes bestseller in Australia and Britain, introducing new generation to her story. And Nancy, at age 89, is finally comfortable telling her story, comfortable with her legend, comfortable acknowledging that yes, she did extraordinary things, yes, she was brave, yes, she was effective warrior. August 7, 2011, Nancy Wake dies in London at age 98, having outlived the Third Reich by 66 years, having outlived most of the Nazis who hunted her, having seen world change dramatically from World War II through Cold War through modern era. And her obituaries appear in newspapers worldwide, describing her as the most decorated servicewoman, the White Mouse, the woman who killed with her bare hands, the socialite who became warrior.
The question of what made Nancy Wake so effective as agent and resistance leader is worth examining, because she had no military training before the war. She was socialite, journalist, ordinary civilian, but she became one of most successful Allied agents in France, and several factors explain her effectiveness. First is her personality. She was naturally rebellious, strong-willed, independent, not willing to accept authority just because it was authority. And these traits that made her difficult conventional woman made her excellent irregular warrior. Second is her motivation. She had witnessed Nazi brutality in Germany in 1933. She had personal hatred of Nazism that was visceral and deep. And when her husband was killed by the Gestapo, that motivation became even stronger. She wasn't fighting for abstract principles. She was fighting enemies she knew were evil, and that clarity of purpose sustained her through danger and hardship.
Third is her intelligence and adaptability. Nancy was naturally clever, good at reading people, good at thinking on her feet, good at improvising solutions, and these skills were crucial for operating behind enemy lines, where situations changed constantly and agents needed to adapt instantly. And Nancy's intelligence, combined with her training, made her extremely effective. Fourth is her physical toughness. Nancy was 31 when she started SOE training, which was older than most agents, but she was physically strong, capable of enduring hardship, capable of bicycling 500 kilometers or hiking through mountains or going days without sleep, and this physical toughness was essential for survival. Fifth is her gender. Being woman gave Nancy certain advantages. German soldiers and Gestapo officers often underestimated women, didn't consider women as potential resistance fighters or spies, and Nancy exploited this, used her charm and sophistication to deflect suspicion, played role of wealthy socialite when necessary, and gender that society saw as weakness became tactical advantage. The 5 million franc bounty placed on Nancy by the Gestapo shows how effective she was. The Gestapo doesn't place highest bounty of the war on someone who's ineffective. They placed it on Nancy because she was destroying their operations, helping hundreds of soldiers escape, organizing resistance, and they desperately wanted to capture her. And the fact that they never did, that Nancy evaded capture for years despite being the most wanted person in France, shows her skill. The bicycle mission to deliver radio codes is example of Nancy's determination. 200 to 500 kilometers through German-occupied territory on bicycle is extraordinary physical feat. Most people couldn't do it, and Nancy did it because it was necessary, because the resistance needed those codes, and she didn't consider it heroic, just necessary. And that attitude, doing impossible things because they need to be done without seeking recognition, defines Nancy's character. The killing of German sentry with bare hands is the most famous incident of Nancy's career, and it reveals something important about her. She was willing to do what was necessary, even if it was unpleasant. Killing someone with your bare hands is intimate, brutal, difficult, and Nancy did it because it was necessary for mission. And she didn't dwell on it, didn't feel guilty, recognized it as act of war, and moved on. And that psychological toughness, ability to do difficult things without being paralyzed by emotion, was crucial for her survival. The organizing of 7,000 resistance fighters shows Nancy's leadership abilities. Coordinating that many fighters from different political groups with different motivations required diplomatic skill, tactical knowledge, logistical ability, and personal authority, and Nancy, at 32 years old, managed all of it. Earned respect of French resistance fighters who could have rejected her as foreign woman, and led them effectively in a guerrilla campaign that contributed to Allied victory. The cost Nancy paid for her resistance work is important to acknowledge. She lost her husband Henri, who was tortured and executed. She lost her comfortable life. She developed PTSD that troubled her for decades. She struggled with alcohol. She had difficulty forming lasting relationships after the war. And this is a common pattern for SOE agents and resistance fighters. The experiences of living under constant threat of death, of killing, of watching people die leave psychological scars that don't heal easily.
The sexism Nancy faced after the war is significant. She ran for parliament twice and lost, partly because voters in 1950s Australia weren't willing to elect women, especially unconventional women like Nancy. And this shows the paradox women warriors face. During war, they can be heroes, can do things men can't do. But after war, society expects them to return to traditional roles, and Nancy couldn't do that. Couldn't pretend to be a conventional housewife after years of killing Nazis. The recognition Nancy received, becoming most decorated servicewoman of World War II, validates her contributions. But Nancy herself was ambivalent about recognition. She didn't fight for medals. She fought because she hated Nazis and wanted to defeat them. And the medals were nice, but they didn't change what happened, didn't bring Henri back, didn't erase the trauma. And Nancy's complicated relationship with her own legend, simultaneously proud of what she accomplished but troubled by the cost, is authentic response to extraordinary circumstances.
The comparison to other female SOE agents shows how dangerous the work was. Dozens of women were sent into occupied France as SOE agents. Many were captured and executed. Violet Sabot, Noor Inayat Khan, Odette Sansom survived but was tortured. And Nancy's survival until age 98 is partly luck, partly skill, but mostly shows that she was extremely good at her job. She evaded capture when others didn't. She survived when others died. Nancy's longevity, living to 98, allowed her to see recognition grow over decades. In immediate post-war years, women's contributions to war were often minimized, but by 1980s and 90s, there was more appreciation for what female agents and resistance fighters accomplished, and Nancy lived long enough to see her story properly recognized, to see books and documentaries made about her life, to see new generations inspired by White Mouse. The lesson from Nancy Wake's story for modern military is that gender is not a limiting factor for combat effectiveness. Nancy killed enemies, led troops in combat, survived under extreme conditions, did everything male soldiers did, and often did it better. And modern militaries that restrict women from combat roles are wasting human resources. Nancy proved in 1944 that women can be warriors, and nothing has changed in human biology since then to make that less true. The lesson for individuals is that ordinary people can become extraordinary when circumstances demand it. Nancy was socialite, not trained soldier, but when war came, she adapted, she learned, she became effective warrior. And this shows that courage and capability are not innate traits limited to special people. They're responses that anyone can develop when motivated and when given opportunity.
If you know someone who's told they can't do something because of their gender or background, someone who's dismissed as unsuitable for challenging role, someone who needs reminder that conventional limitations are often just prejudice disguised as fact, share this story. Not because everyone should become a spy or resistance fighter, but because Nancy Wake demonstrates that determination and intelligence and courage matter more than gender or background, that the most dangerous warrior isn't always the one society expects, and that woman who society saw as socialite became most wanted person in France through fighting Nazis, organizing 7,000 resistance fighters, and killing Germans with her bare hands, and lived to 98, having survived everyone who hunted her. And that combination of courage, intelligence, and toughness made her a legend. What will you accomplish when you stop accepting other people's assessment of your limitations?